I think for a practical use, the definition of trauma as being something that is too much, too fast, too early, or for too long could work. Responsibility is the ability to respond. So, yeah, just to make it a bit slower, this is what it's really all about. It's not about the harshness and the strictness and the rigidity, you must, but it is, are you able to do something differently? So fear gets created because fear is what moves us most quickly. Because our brain, nervous system, was designed to survive. Okay, it keeps us alive at all costs. So everything that is threatening, we respond very quickly. And there is a bias in your brain, so your nervous system and your thinking brain, they pay more attention to the negative. It's called the negativity bias, and it's very important, very necessary, because for survival, it is more important to pay attention to what is not right, what is wrong, what is missing, what is threatening. It's more important than to pay attention to what's good.
Vítajte priatelia, moje meno je Dušan Plichta a vítam vás pri ďalšom podcaste Powerlogy, kde prinášame inovatívne pohľady a myšlienky na naše zdravie z takého holistického pohľadu. A dneska to bude špeciálna epizóda, ktorá bude celá po anglicky, pretože tu mám zahraničného hostia a o chvíľu sa už prepnem do angličtiny. Takže tí, ktorí nás počúvate a viete po anglicky, tak myslím si, že aj s tou mojou takou intermediate English to bude OK. A tí, ktorí potrebujete titulky, tak na YouTube si to môžete pozrieť s titulkami, tak aby ste z toho mali plnohodnotný zážitok. A ja už teraz prepnem do angličtiny a privítam tu Dorothe Trassl. So welcome here in Powerlogy.
Thank you for having me.
And Dorothe is a special guest that will bring us the new outlook on a holistic approach to health. But basically we will speak about emotions and kind of emotional connection to mental health and to our crisis that we see in our current environment of the mental health issues or emotional issues and how it fits all together. And we will go through work and that how Dorothe approached it by different workshops they do and what are their experiences and how it helps to complete healing in different ways in different people. So Dorothe, welcome once again. And I would start with actually like how you came up to the point that you started to work on a different layer of health as we usually know it from our kind of basic approach that if I'm sick, I'm going to doctor. They will give me some guidance. Okay, they will prescribe me probably certain medications, but now we see that the field of psychotherapy and work with mental health is booming, and also that we have a lot of issues in our society with that. So how you came to the point that you discovered that there are different layers, and what are the different layers that we can imagine that we see now that we probably need to approach if you want to somehow heal and get to the real energy and health and the real life to live it from fullest?
Yeah. Thank you for asking this question. This is a question that I did not even know that it was important to me, because when I started on my journey, I was not young, but I was a young mother of 3 children, and I was living with my family in South Africa. So not in Europe, but I was far away. And I had a strong interest in psychology and health. I was a yoga teacher, I was a mother of children, and I was running cross-country and things like that. So I was really interested in being healthy, being my best me, and being available for my children. So while I was in Africa, I was not allowed to work because of visa. We were staying there. And I did a lot of charity work. And then I thought, okay, after all the charity I've done now, maybe I study again. I already had a diploma, but I said, okay, let me study again. And I studied psychology because I was always very interested in that. Now, in Africa, the approach is very practical. So if you want to be a clinical psychologist helping people with mental illnesses, you need to be working with and doing your practical internships right from the start. Okay, so I ended up being in a Muslim Indian welfare organization with a telephone hotline. So I'm on the phone with people with all their millions of problems, phoning from prison, phoning with depression, phoning with addictions, phoning with problems with education, children, marriages, everything. And I was not the happiest of all beings, because I noticed that people were calling in and you kind of offer them something, but then they call back, because it's not done with one session where you talk to them quickly and then it's gone. But some of these issues and problems, very soon I noticed that they all had a traumatic background. So with most of the things, from the relationship problems, children, education, addictions, health, most of them had a trauma background. Now, because we were a free of charge hotline, we got a lot of training in that organization. So amongst others, we got emotional work, we got spiritual work, because South Africa is a very spiritual country. We got energetic work, we got family systems therapy, we got gestalt, we got analytical processes for those who are more interested in the mental things. We got communication skills and everything on the planet. But still, what was missing was, for me, personally coming from the West, for me it was like, how do I put all of this together? You know, all these different approaches, how can we marry them to be fast, effective, and human? And because I was living in Africa, I was watching the communities, because we were going into the very poor places also. And some of these communities, they never had any psychologists or therapists coming in, but I could see that they had developed an amazing, how can I say, way of dealing with their emotions, with their mental health, and with trauma that we had probably forgotten about. And I watched these African communities. They were drumming, they were shaking, they were dancing, they had their rituals. They were having a very rich, human, grounded life in community. And I started to study a little bit closer. So what exactly are they doing here? What exactly is happening when they approach their health, mental health, emotional health, physical health, and spiritual health from this very grounded, very humane way of being with each other? And because I was very curious, I tried to marry what I saw in the communities with what I already had a background in psychology. So finally, the pieces started to come together. Finally, I started to get that if you want to be happy, healthy, and functioning as a human being in your relationship, if you have any, with your children, if you have them, with your job, hopefully you have one, in your community, if you have it, if you want to really function fully and be happy on top of that, you have to look at the things that are blocking you from realizing, from living your full potential. And first I looked at it and I said, okay, let me study this, let me really explore, let me understand, let me take this. But then I noticed, oh, I was doing it for myself. So more than anything else, I myself needed to integrate my own wounds, my own emotional topics, my own trauma, my own addictions, be it to sports, be it to something else. I needed to integrate and heal that for myself, in myself. And because I'm not an African lady, I'm not living in a tribal community, and I'm not living, not anymore, I'm back in Germany, I had to change it a little bit. So I had to make it a bit more, how can I say, easier to digest in the Western community. So when I came back to Germany, with all that I had developed and experienced, I applied this for my Western community to make sense in our communities, in our way of relating and having community.
So for me, like, could we understand it that it's probably like bringing ancestral knowledge, connecting dots with the latest science, because that's the psychology, the new information, how we learn, and we're going by our minds, that we would like to know and understand how it fits together, how it works, how our psyche and our health actually, what everything is behind it, and it's also my passion. And and it's amazing that we see that some ancestral cultures, tribes, somehow they lived different lives, but on the other side, that also, like, in the history, like, mankind went through different hard times, and this is kind of like really different living, because I see that those communities, that's what we are missing, because we had started to be more separated in Western culture. So what are the most like critical issues that you find out? And I catch the one, like you said a lot of times, like, word trauma, and I think it's quite popular now.
Yeah.
But what do you mean by trauma? Because obviously, like, we can say like the main interpretator of the trauma, I think also, like, people in Slovakia probably know, it's Gabor Mate, as a psychologist, and opening up this issue. But a lot of people I met, like, we say trauma, and me myself was like, okay, but like, what's trauma? I have like quite good childhood, no war, nothing like super traumatic. And if I just sit and you ask me, like, it was okay. Obviously, a couple of things happened, like, but every life is different. Like, so what we can understand by this trauma, and how could people understand it better? What could be the point of the trauma in our health, in Western culture, here in our society?
So what is probably the easiest definition of trauma. And this is not what psychology would give you, but I think for practical use, the definition of trauma as being something that is too much, too fast, too early, or for too long could work.
Okay.
So, for example, there's different kinds of trauma. There's trauma that you experience when you have a shock trauma, like you have an accident, you have a sudden illness, somebody that you love dies or goes away, a relationship breaks up. This is something that can be too much for your system. So there is a possibility that the resources you have at that time in your life are not enough to deal with the situation, to deal with what is happening currently. But there's also trauma that is more long-standing. For example, when you are living with a job that you don't actually really like, when you are living in a relationship, in a community that is not supporting your way of being, your life, or, which is unfortunately the truth for most of my clients, if you had in your childhood experiences that were either too much, or at a critical time of your life, your parents were failing you, not blaming parents, but just acknowledging that we are all, I'm a mother of 3, we all fail our children at times. Sometimes in critical moments, I was not there when, okay? Or because we are human beings, the trauma that our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents, and our grandparents' grandparents, what they have experienced gets passed on. And this is fascinating knowledge. And I'm really, this is what I love at the moment. Specifically, how do we pass on the trauma epigenetically from inside the body, emotionally, of the ways and how we feel or what we are not allowed to feel, and also with the conditioning that our mind gets. Because if my parents believe in certain things, they unwillingly, sometimes they don't want to, but they pass it on to me, okay? Because children are like sponges. They drink in what they see, and they repeat what they see. So if I'm behaving, feeling, acting in a certain way, it gets passed on to my children automatically. And what I cannot tolerate, like which kind of emotions, which kind of energies, what kind of beliefs, that also gets passed on to the next generation. So we see almost like, we can almost see lines of trauma going through families. And at the same time, the same trauma also creates illnesses. So if you take a family system and you make dots for, is there alcoholism? Is there heart disease? Is there relational failure?
Cancer.
You can actually make dots and see that going through the family. And if you get super scientific and you want to marry that with emotional problems, then paint next to them the dots for emotional problems. And then maybe you can really see like a landscape, like a map of what happens here inside your being, which was passed on from the generations before. And I don't like parent bashing, so I don't want to say my parents failed me. They did, but it wasn't on purpose, you know. My parents loved me a lot, I know that. But still there were things they couldn't give to me, you know. Knowledge they didn't have, wisdom that they could not embrace, ways of being and acting that were not available to them. And to me that had an effect. Now it is my responsibility to cure this, to transform this, transmute it, to integrate that so that I don't pass it on to my children, because trauma gets passed on. And what I love about Gabor Mate's work is that he works with emotions. And this is something that in the past was not acknowledged, the importance of emotionality in the whole thing.
Yeah, that's right. I remember from my childhood that I was like on the other side, first time like happy because I thought like I'm strong because I was raised like a good warrior, and I couldn't complain about it because from the certain parts I'm really ready to show up in the life, and but then on it, like every gift has its shadow. So that was something that we haven't learned. And what I like, as you said, I think there is an important point, and maybe you can discuss it a little bit more into deep, like that you mentioned that it's my responsibility, like it's mine, because I meet a lot of people. And now it's like, okay, I'm not healthy, something happens, I got intolerance, I couldn't eat those foods, something, but it's like, it happened, like the sickness came to me, you know, and just like, there are a lot of parents, and like, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but probably like quarter of the year they are home with the kids because of certain illness, like kids are sick, families again around that, like it's around that, and just saying like those are viruses, they are coming from kindergarten, and we are sick, like sickness came to me, and what's the connection there that with this responsibility, that I don't blame parents, I'm just saying I'm here and now and I could change it, and it's my responsibility how I kind of perceive life and what emotions happens. And can you elaborate more on that responsibility, and what's your experience, how people approach their responsibility?
Mm-hmm. So I'm German.
Yeah.
So responsibility in Germany is a big thing. You know, we are quite rigid with this. You are so responsible for so many things. But in English, I like the word because you could translate it. Responsibility is the ability to respond. So,
wow.
Yeah?
Cool.
Just to make it a bit slower. This is what it's really all about. It's not about the harshness and the strictness and the rigidity, you must, but it is, are you able to do something differently? Okay?
The response.
And this is really something that I find very important. How, when I look at my situation or my children being sick all the time, could there be a root cause, something that I have not seen so far? Something that in the past I was not willing to see or to accept? Because we need awareness first to really see, to look, to listen. And then we need to open with what we find, because sometimes we don't like what we find, okay? We all of a sudden realize, okay, my children are lacking something, or they're having something too much that's not healthy for them, but I don't like what I'm seeing. But how much can I accept this and the discomfort it brings when I change? How much can I accept the discomfort of change so that I can be able to respond differently, to be responsible for my life and the life of my children as long as they can't do it themselves, you know? And nowadays we have so many possibilities of where we could have insight, where we could have change, but very often we avoid it because it triggers something inside that's not comfortable. And when it's not comfortable, most people avoid it. It's easier to blame a virus, society, my parents. It's easier to put it outside than to say, okay, let me look at what I am doing and let me look at the resources I have what are my possibilities? What is accessible to me? And not everybody has access to everything, especially not in Africa. But here in the West, we have so many possibilities. We can really look after our health from nutrition. We can look after our health from movement. We can look after our health emotionally. There is support here. And we can also look at all the other aspects for our children as well. Because in children, specifically, I see a lot of emotional reasons for what's happening physically. Because they are so young, they haven't poisoned themselves and abused their bodies as long as we did.
Okay.
But when children fall sick, very often it has an emotional background or a relational connection.
Yeah, that's like, really makes sense as saying, like, coming from Health Optimization Summit in London and in advanced kind of science, trying to connect all those dots. Now we see that probably the bottleneck is now not in the nutrition or kind of like taking care of body, because there we have enough knowledge and like we know what to do. It's just about like behavior change. And now in the Western part we are quite lucky, but you see that a lot of people can't make it, let's say, to slim down or taking care of their body, because somehow they actually don't like their body. So the relationships, as you said, like we usually, as also in Slovakia, like I got my seminars and camps and get to the point of responsibility. So usually everybody is like, as a man, like, I'm responsible in work, there I'm responsible for this and that, I can manage. But then you take out the mirror and you show them, and are you responsible to yourself? Like like responsible to yourself, that you take care of yourself as a health, energy, sleep, nutrition. And suddenly you see in our culture, like, this is like, first, like, everybody is proud, like, my biggest values are family, and then work and some status or achievement, and then you have yourself, kind of, because it was like said that you are egocentric or very, very, very self-oriented. So could you explain what's the kind of healthy balance, or what should be the priority in terms of like taking care of oneself? Because my opinion is like, it looks like weird, but like, first I need to be responsible to myself, because if I don't have energy, I can't, like, it's like in a plane, you know, that you need to give the mask to yourself first, and then you give to your child. So, and I think we are failing on that.
Yes. And I believe it has a lot to do with our conditioning. So, like you said, egotistical, me first, something like that. But as you said with the plane, put your own mask on first. You have to look after yourself. Otherwise, you cannot look after anybody else. And if we go back to trauma, trauma is a disconnection. It's a separation from. So trauma is not what happens. It's not that event when you had the accident, or when somebody died, or when you didn't get what you wanted. It's not the event as such, but it is what happens to your body, to your nervous system when it happens. And that which stays behind, which lodges in the body and the nervous system, is what happened to the nervous system. So you get activated, you need to do something, you're getting emotional, you get the energy to deal with it, but then you don't do it, okay? You do not. So it is stored in the physical body, it's stored in the nervous system, and it can change your physique, your body, for a long time. So when we say we look after ourselves first, it is almost like we do a spring clean in our system. So we look at, okay, where have I neglected myself in all my areas? And how can I unblock my potential so that it is available not only for myself, but for my family, for my children? Because I cannot give what I don't have. Some people are really good in caretaking others, but they don't look after themselves very well. But if you have ever been on the receiving end of somebody who looks after you, but not after themselves, it doesn't feel good. So it can feel really sticky. It can feel really wrong when somebody wants to caretake me because they can't or don't want to caretake themselves. And our conditioning is very important in this respect, because our children are also looking at us. So how do I take care of myself? They learn that from us. Do I prioritize my own sleep, my nutrition, my movement, my emotional health, my solitude, my connection to nature? Do I actually have some connection to a higher value? Okay, do I have spirituality or a value system if I don't like spirituality? Do I have that connection? Because trauma severs it, it cuts it, it separates it. And healing means reconnecting first to myself, then to my closest loved ones, then to the world and my community, like nature, also being alone, just in solitude in nature, and then also to something that is higher than myself. And when I can give this example to my children, that's all they need. The rest, nature does it for them.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, as I watch, so there is a lot of kind of opinions that we have a problem here also, because as you said, there are certain traumas in different nations, and that we need also like new leadership and new leaders that are not traumatized. And now probably we can see, and our politics, and not only in our country, just like speaking about it generally, we see wars in the world happens, but and I read also from the scientific point of view that the problem is that a lot of leaders are traumatized, and then you can take now like certain leader in Russia and certain leader, as it was in South Africa at that time, Nelson Mandela, that are two different leaders, and I think that could be also of interest, not only for women, that I think they are more open to those kind of emotional healing techniques and workshops and understanding of the traumas, but also for men and managers and leaders that probably I would ask you what's your experience, because mostly what I see, there are more women at this kind of seminars and workshops or whatever in terms of, as we are speaking, emotional health, also, workshops about how to raise children, family, all those things, than the men. So what's your experience? Why it is like that? Why men are a little bit kind of, distant or protecting themselves, probably, from that?
I think it's really the word that you were using, protecting themselves. So when I'm confronted, anybody, any human being, when we are confronted with a situation that we don't know yet, okay, our nervous system activates. It prepares us for this unfamiliar territory, for this unfamiliar situation. And for hormonal reasons and conditioning reasons and social reasons, men have been educated to respond in certain ways. And probably in your country, maybe even more than in Germany, there is a way that if something comes towards me that I don't know yet, my first response is to defend against it. Okay? And in the field of healing, there are always emotions involved. I can't fix everything by cutting it open and stitching it back together. Very often I need to look at the emotional reasons behind something. I need to have a look at the nervous system and what happened. I need to look at trauma. But this brings up a lot of vulnerability, insecurity, woundedness, hurt, pain, all the things that unfortunately nowadays not only men but women as well get conditioned not to feel, to avoid and to defend against. So instead of opening and embracing vulnerability and pain and emotionality, there can be a conditioning to say, no, I'm tough, I harden up, I don't feel this. And I'm working in businesses as well, so with managers and really top category managers. And depending on what kind of company it is, the company culture could be one of dog eat dog. So fighting, competition, this. Or the company culture could be more like a family system, could be more like we respect each other and harmony is very important. But definitely the culture has an effect on all the people working in that surrounding. So when I go into these business trainings, I don't fuff about with optimization of self. But what I'm really asking them is, what's your inner compass like? What is your truth? And we explore, how has your ego, so that persona that you fabricated and said, this is me, and you put it against the world, how has your ego actually harmed not only you, but also your family and loved ones and the companies? Because when we look at the top levels in companies, very often it's like a slaughterhouse of egos. It's almost like a battlefield of egos trying to win the better of each other. Instead of cooperation, instead of working together towards a common goal, there can be fighting and defense just so that I keep what is mine and make it bigger.
Yeah, that's what we see. It's kind of like battle for status, and we were probably, as I found, we were a little bit like conditioned that from the very childhood in our system, mostly in Slovakia, that there is not enough. Yes. Now there is not enough space, not enough food, not enough kind of work. Mm-hmm. If you don't get this job, somebody else will, and there's not enough. And this is kind of, and it's hard to change that, because you open the media and everywhere around it's that not enough. And from that, also would like to then ask you, because you said this word ego. So what's your definition of ego? Because there we work with that, we see a lot of people mention that, but everybody can have a different connotation or different understanding of ego. Some people say it's all bad. Some people said, like, in terms of personal development, you need to get rid of ego. So can you explain how you understand the ego and how it fits into our life?
Well, everybody has an ego because it's necessary. It is almost like a shortcut, an automation in my personality. We are born with tendencies in our personality. So we have talents, we have strengths, and we also have weaknesses, right from the word go. And it's almost as if the ego is a strategy or a set of strategies that has developed very early in life because it worked.
Very early means?
Very early in childhood already. So you can also see personalities and egos in children.
So 3 years old?
Well, you see tendencies, but by the time they go to school, most of them already have an ego.
Okay,
so by the time, I don't know what...
My daughter is now 7.
Yeah, so she probably has one.
Yes, I can see that.
And I don't want to judge it necessarily, okay? So there's a lot of judgment out there about egos and things, but I would prefer to look at it this way. You have a value, something that is very dear to you, and then you have a strategy how to get that.
Okay.
And the strategy how to get there, this is what your ego has on autopilot. Now, unfortunately, your ego, to be more effective, ignores everything that contradicts it. Like you said, if I'm a tough man and I'm responsible and I'm strong, I cannot acknowledge that I'm weak or vulnerable or that I don't have my act together. So
because I would not get my goal if
exactly.
I admit that I'm weak or vulnerable.
Exactly.
Okay.
Because your strategy is to be strong in life. Now you could have somebody else...
Because there is a confidence and
Yeah.
on the other, and some kind of like, something that I can grab. On the other side, there is a fear and something that I can't believe in.
Yes. So you run away from something that you run away from and something that you run towards.
Okay.
And that in between, this rubber elastic, that is your ego. And everybody has one, because you cannot think, you cannot be conscious and aware of every single move, every single thought. About 80% of our day are on autopilot. Do you know how you got here in the morning? If you were riding your bike or walking by foot, you do it automatically and you don't think, you do something else. And a lot of our things are on autopilot, so they run for us. So when you are confronted in your ego mode with a certain situation, your whole body and heart and energy, everything knows what to do about it, how you react. And you have to stop and pause and become aware and open a little bit to see more possibilities. So every ego is rigid and defensive and kind of limited. So what you said about the lack consciousness, so that consciousness of not enough, that is directly linked with egoic states. And you know exactly that when you are in flow, in openness, when you are connected, when you are really present, ego is not there and lack is not there, but you are generous, you are grateful, you are connected, you are able to support and to receive support. So it's more a flow state. But when you go on autopilot, everything closes and it becomes small and rigid. And then we also get defensive, because this is our version of me. So I've painted some cardboard and beautiful colors and said, that's me. And I need you to believe that. And if you look behind it, no, we don't do that. So we defend.
Yeah, nice.
But this is what happens now, because there's so much fear in our cultures, in our societies. And social media is a horrible, how can I say, jungle of fear. Everybody produces more fear. If you don't do this, that will happen. And this is dangerous and that's threatening, and don't do this because whatever. So fear gets created because fear is what moves us most quickly. Because our brain, nervous system, was designed to survive. Okay? It keeps us alive at all costs. So everything that is threatening, we respond very quickly. Things that are pleasant, we don't have to respond so quickly, because it's more important to run away from the tiger when you hear him growl than to get the banana that you see.
Or we have a tendency to spend the least energy necessary for certain things, so we have a tendency towards laziness.
Yeah, and there is a bias in your brain. So your nervous system and your thinking brain, they pay more attention to the negative. It's called the negativity bias. And it's very important, very necessary, because for survival, it is more important to pay attention to what is not right, what is wrong, what is missing, what is threatening. It's more important than to pay attention to what's good.
But you can hack it or change it by certain work, because I can imagine and I see it in my family that things that I'm like going for holidays, and for me, as I traveled a lot as a child with my parents, like there is no threat, you know, so it's just like excitement. I'm going somewhere, there will be a lot of new things, that's cool, somehow I will survive, and that way. And on the other side, my wife is much more protective, like what are the dangers, what could happen there, and this way. So this is just probably one very simple example of different modes that we apply towards life.
And what you just mentioned could also be a bit along the line of personality.
Okay.
Because we get personalities that are very careful, very guarded, very looking at safety a lot. And we get others that are kind of like, whoa, adventure is cool. Let me get that energy of arousal, of excitement. Because excitement is basically fear with a smile. So when you are excited about something that you don't know where you're going, something new, you are excited, but the arousal in the body, that happening, is a similar kind of energy, just with a smile. Yeah. And yes, I'm an absolute fan of practicing psycho-hygiene by not consuming too much of the media that arouses fear or lack or that kind of thing. I'm very careful also with news. So I'm very conscious about when, how much, and what I consume in this area. So
you're taking care of your mind, basically.
Absolutely.
Because you also understand the nervous system and brains has certain tendencies, so you better set your environment for that. Yeah. That's great. But finally, in the end of this interview, I would like to ask you, like, what are your actual workshops? Let's say tomorrow in Bratislava, you're starting a whole weekend, seminars. So it's the name is emotion or inner child.
Yeah.
Which one is?
So my whole brand is called Emotion, but E/motion. So I want to point to the fact that our emotions are a very necessary part of the body because they give us the energy for motion. Emotion is basically the signal for the whole body and mind. This is happening in the world and this is what you need to do. It's a very valuable and very important information, our emotions. And emotions is the fuel of life. So without emotions, your life is dull. It's almost like cardboard, okay? Because the fuel of life is in the emotionality. If you can't enjoy what you're doing, it's empty, okay? You run, but you never get this, wow, the gratitude, the love, the depth. And I have a couple of different workshops, and the one tomorrow is the inner child. So tomorrow we are looking at developmental trauma. So what happened when I was a child? And almost more importantly, what did not happen? So, could my parents role model how to feel and sense an emotion and what to do with it? Did my parents support me as an entity, as a person of my own? Or did I have to play a role? Or was I in some story of the family? Did my parents actually role model how to be connected? Could they have relationships? Was there equality? Was there fairness? Did I feel supported? Did I feel like, okay, home, my family is the place where I can always come back to. I can be myself and venture in the world, but if something goes wrong, I can always come back to. was it safe at home? You know, did you feel safe, supported, seen, loved? Yes or no? And it's never too late for a happy childhood. And some of us, we have to heal it now and do it now because we never got it. And it's not necessarily the fault of our parents, because things happen. Maybe they were sick or out of job, or maybe there was a special need member in the family. Something happened that did not give me the 360 degrees wholesome and healthy experience I would have needed as a child. So that's the workshop tomorrow. But otherwise, I also have a workshop which is all about trauma and what happens to the nervous system when you get traumatized. Because one of the things I love to raise awareness of is the importance of the nervous system in everything, in your health, in your emotionality, in your happiness, because that's that's your inbuilt steering wheel. So if you don't look after that, the rest falls in the second seat, I would say.
Yeah, so I think the burnout is linked to that nervous system overload.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes. Stress. I mean, everybody knows stress. Okay. Stress is when your nervous system has been running on high activation for too long a period. So you can really literally...
chronic stress.
Yeah. So you can really deplete your whole body, your hormonal system, your bodily functioning, your emotional system can be depleted when you run on stress for too long. Because your body can't discern, am I stressed by work or by my relationship or by my own emotions, or am I stressed because I have past trauma that blocks me in certain areas that I have constantly had to fight?
Or there's a mix of more factors
coming
together.
Or many
something
factors.
In work, some trauma trigger.
Exactly.
And all those things that happened, like pandemic.
Yes,
that
of
was
course,
here, so that triggered a lot of stressors in us.
It did, yes. And I think this is what we're seeing, that when the pandemic happened, people did not have, not all people, didn't have the means to cope with what's happening. And they were separated from each other and cut off what they usually do to distract themselves from their bad feelings. And so a lot of people had a lot of problems because they could not go on with life like before. They had to face themselves in solitude. And that for a lot of people was just too much. And we had a high rise in mental illnesses in Germany. I don't know about this country, but with us, it was a lot.
In general, also in the world, like United States, it's like 68%, something like really. But that makes sense, you know, because somehow we weren't. And I think that there's the great opportunity for us, and the future is just to understand that better, because we were not taught in schools in terms of health. You know, we were not taught about basic nutrition kind of stuff, and not even more about emotions and how it connects. But I think also the psychology is a new science in a certain way, now connecting the dots, and we see that there is a great opportunity, certain way to heal ourselves, like completely heal, and then to great opportunity for evolution, because as we see that we evolve as a nations, and some of the nations are more evolved than others. Like, let's say compare Slovakia to Africa, not saying like, because we Slovak usually like to compare ourselves to Germany, that they are better, they are rich, and we are like small Slovakia. But I think we are quite well off as well, advancing and evolving as a nation, country, and I think we have one thing in common, and maybe we can close that with that one, the big trauma of war, which is actual still here, because let's face it, like we have a war like the next country, and we are quite connected to that. And I saw my parents, like they were triggered by that war a lot. I'm from eastern part of Slovakia, close to Ukraine. We have all my childhood I was there dancing Ukrainian dances and singing songs. So, and we are triggered by that, also from former Czechoslovakia, all that times after the World War II. But Germany, somehow I read that this is the country that has already coped with that trauma on a certain level, the trauma of the war, because Germany has also war, but on the other side, and it's not easy as well. But I read like that generally as a country and a nation, like Germans put, and a lot of government also put a lot of investments to coping with that kind of heritage.
Yeah.
So
I'm not too sure about the emotional heritage. So when I was growing up in Germany post-war, so my parents were still in the war, they grew up in the war, but I was afterwards. In school we were really drilled about the role that Germany had in the war. But what came with it, to come back to the beginning, was a certain responsibility. So we were drilled right from the start to acknowledge what Germany had done, what German people had committed, had done, and at the same time to actually take the responsibility to now, with that knowledge and with this acknowledgement of what happened, to do it differently. And I think a part of why Germany is taking on the role of looking after other nations and, trying to keep the community running and so on, has to do with that there is an awareness, there's the knowing of, if you don't keep your basic instincts in check, if you don't look after yourself and your neighbors, things can go really, really wrong. So there is a different way, I guess, that we were now educated for connection, educated for working together,
communities,
living in harmony with nature, like trying to reduce what harms nature and trying to improve what we can do to balance our comfort and our mobility and this.
Yeah, and then there is an interesting, you have a lot of people coming there as there is an issue also like Muslims, but you incorporate them. Yes. You are not shutting down completely. Obviously there are issues, but this is we see that Germany as a nation and in those terms of I think one of the best nations looking for cooperations, and it's my experience as well. You probably meet with other kind of nations, and they are more we Slovaks are in the competition, but Germans are mostly now open also for Slovak people, incorporating like humankind on the global level, and it's interesting to hear that it's coming from education. So thank you very much, Dorothe.
It's a pleasure.
I think it was just like brief introduction into the field of emotional healing, but I would suggest people, if they were interested in what we're talking here about, and they are looking for understandings of trauma and the mental health and really, so I can really just suggest you to look at Dorothe's website, to read, to see some of the videos, and maybe to join certain workshops or seminars. There is also you have an online course, yes. What I know, so that could be a nice step in, that you explain how also you connect it also with the yoga, with exercise.
Yes, with physical exercise, with yoga, with shaking. And breathing and biohacks that you can get your nervous system to work better.
So that's good, and it worked for me. So I can tell you that I attended one big seminar last year, and it was kind of I don't want to say life-changing, but actually it was in a certain part of my journey and understanding of biohacking from my point of view. And also I like that you explain from a scientific point how nervous system works. It's not just like, a lot of those seminars are very esoteric kind of, and you are very also, I like it maybe as a German, science-based and psychological. So I see also some men are coming to seminars, so it's not only women.
Yes.
It's not bad to be like just a couple of men and a lot of women there. But thank you very much for work that you do, and hope you spend a great time here in Bratislava and Slovakia, and again that you touch a lot of emotion and the lives of people here and around in your life.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.